DGen Nation fam, what is up? What is happening? We're back once again. It's the Week 11 NFL DFS main slate, powered by the DGen Nation and the Fantasy Authority. What's going on, everybody? Ryan Williams, you're at Ryan Alexander _W is where you can find me on Twitter. Joined by the usual suspects, the Godfather himself, Mr. Kevin Steele at Fantasy Rat 13, the Fish, and Matty D Moneybags, aka Matty DFS, is where you can find him on Twitter. Boys, let's get into this Week 11 slate. How we doing? How we feeling? Santa Claus, talk to me.
Hey, first of all, that's goat. Okay, that's why there's a goat next to my name. I'm the one with the goat there.
I look like a fish. I couldn't really tell.
No, that's a goat.
Oh,
see the horns?
No, I thought it was like a clownfish or something.
Hey, you keep talking, you're gonna get the horns. That's all I'm gonna say.
Ooh, bring the heat, Kev. Bring the heat.
Can I get like a Hey Arnold emoji next to my name for Dan Arnold season?
Hey, yo, Dan Arnold catching a touchdown on Thursday night?
That's right. He's Primetime Arnold. He needs to change his name to Dan Primetime Arnold.
He wasn't looking primetime with that drop earlier, though.
That's all right. He made up for it. He caught a TD, you know, at Thanksgiving. What was it, 2 years ago, Thanksgiving? He caught a TD in primetime.
Yeah, I think it was 2018. Yeah. 2018, Dan Arnold paying off dividends. Get them Kyler scores up. That's what I want to see. Boys, we got Week 11 slate on tap. Just what a fun one we got here. I mean, coming off of the Week 10 kind of chaos and madness as there was, as we had, you know, Mike Davis gate, we had Wingate Part 2 coming through to fruition, and now we had a Week 11 slate that was kind of shaping up to be a nice one before practices started. And then the Wednesday injury report comes around, the Thursday injury report comes around, and there's just so many question marks on this slate. So let's kind of just talk about it from a main overview just before we get into the slate as a whole. And we have a lot, you know, to discuss. I mean, Christian McCaffrey, he's not going to be back again. Mike Davis is, you know, going to be that back again, but now he's priced up in the 6K range on where he should be in that game going against the Lions. So, I mean, that's going to be interesting there. We got a ton of wide receivers who are on the injury report. Devontae Adams, who's not been seen at practice for the past two, is a big one. Calvin Ridley is practicing, but he's limited. Allen Lazard for the Packers is limited coming back. Kenny Golladay missed again. Marvin Jones is limited. So really interesting stuff going on in the Carolina and Detroit game. Also, we got Alvin Kamara now no-go on Thursday today on the injury report with Drew Brees already set to miss that game. So this should be a fun quarterback discussion as we talk about what to do there. Because that's going to be an interesting game there with New Orleans taking on Atlanta. And I think Drew Lock was set to return today. I'm not sure what happened with him. I know he's been dealing with some stuff and they thought he could play. Some other reports were saying that he could be a long shot. So that'll be an interesting thing to monitor there as well. And then Joe Mixon, who, I mean, I'm kind of almost forgetting about Joe Mixon even being relevant because he hasn't played since like week 6. But he's, again, you know, not practicing and things of that nature. So a lot of injuries, lot to unpack there on the slate. But why don't you guys let's just talk from an overall standpoint here of just what games are standing out to you. I mean, that's usually what we've been trying to do. And we don't have a Seattle on the slate. We don't have the Chiefs on the main slate. We don't have the Cardinals on the main slate. So, I mean, a lot to really get into here. Maddie, why don't you start it off and kind of just talk to me about where you're kind of looking at for spots early on in this week with nothing really being set, but just what stood out to you.
So I think we're going to get a lot of chalky quarterbacks this week because there's some pretty obvious quarterbacks in really good spots that I think a lot of the field is going to gravitate to, like the ones that stick off the page right away when you just look at matchups without diving into anything. You've got Herbert against the Jets. He's going to be popular, even though he's the third highest priced quarterback. I think Lamar gets some ownership against Tennessee just because of how bad Tennessee's defense has been this year. Even though Lamar hasn't really looked like himself, I think that he's going to garner some ownership. And then you've got guys like Joe Burrow. Why are the Bengals priced as low as they are? Like if you're playing cash games this week, it's really hard to get off the Bengals. You've got Burrow at 5,500, Tyler Boyd at 5,600, and T. Higgins at 5,900. So it's their three main guys in the pass game and you're getting them for each of them is under 6K. So that I think that stack's going to be really popular, especially with how cheap the Washington side is to run it back on the other side. You've got McKissick and Gibson are the obvious ones, and McLaurin. I mean, it's just such an easy game to stack that I think a lot of the field's going to be on that. And as much as I want to play it, I'm also weary about stacking up Cincinnati and Washington. I want to play Aaron Rodgers against Indy. Indy is not really a good run. They are a good run defense, and I think that their pass defense is much more beatable than their run defense is. So the key for that, though, you mentioned Devontae Adams. He's not practicing right now, and if he's out, then I have zero interest in Aaron Rodgers.
Right.
So it's going to be so hard to find pivots this week, but I think you can do it. Like Big Ben against Jacksonville. We just saw last week that Pittsburgh, they've become one of the pass heaviest offenses in the league, especially during one-score games. They're near the top, especially over the last 4 weeks. They've really taken to the air the last 4 weeks. And so, I mean, last week we saw them smash Cincinnati, and now it's going to be a similar game script against Jacksonville, who has been a pass funnel all year. And I think Big Ben could smash again, and he's not going to be owned. So I think there's interesting spots like that. And then you've got an interesting spot, 6,200. You've got Cam Newton against Houston, which we know Houston's run defense is the bottom of the barrel in the entire league. And a lot of people are going to play Harris, the running back, when I think a lot of people aren't going to play Cam, and he's technically their goal line back. So I think people will see, generally when they play a quarterback, they're like, okay, well, who am I stacking with him? And they don't get that with Cam Newton. So, it's an interesting week. Obviously, there's going to be a lot that changes, but I say it every week. But I think this week, just as important as the last couple of weeks, you've got to pay attention to ownerships, because we keep seeing these high-owned guys like Jameis Winston's going to be very popular. Joe Burrow's going to be very popular. Justin Herbert's going to be very popular. Yes, these guys are in good matchups, but there are a ton of spots this week where unowned guys can go nuclear, like Big Ben did last week. And I haven't even mentioned the Dallas and Minnesota game, where there's going to be probably zero defense played. Right. And so you've got Andy Dalton and Kirk Cousins, who are, they're not very good quarterbacks, but they're very cheap quarterbacks. And they have very concentrated offenses. Like Ezekiel Elliott's 6,500 this week, and he got 10 targets the last game that Andy Dalton started. So it's an interesting week. I honestly have no clue where I'm going to end up, because there are so many spots to like and to that are just great pivots. I just can't stress enough, pay attention to ownership this week, because I think guys like Jameis Winston are going to be the mega chalk, and you can do things to pivot off of the guys like that.
Yeah, and I think, even piggybacking off of what you said, Maddie, of not only just paying attention to ownerships, as we've preached on this show, multiple times this year, if not year after year, but also kind of paying attention to that news on Sunday. I mean, you and Kev were both discussing on Sunday last week about the reports about Deandre Swift being, saying that they were going to run him more and, kind of give him the lead back role. And we saw that kind of come to fruition. And it just seems like for the past 3 weeks specifically, I think since week 8, that, with whenever the wind was that first time around, there's been somebody on the Sunday reports that has either been, we're going to see more of him, or he's been ruled in and not inactive. That's really kind of dictated things, late, because so many people are locked in early to what their builds are. And we do our show early for Thursday, and usually a lot of the stuff that we talk about, we kind of stay on in some type of degree, but sometimes things can happen that change your builds 100% completely, that get you onto something late. So even monitoring that Sunday news, I think is key. Kev, I want to, as we get into quarterbacks here, I want to toss it over to you, and in the same tune of what Maddie's saying, I do think that this week makes it tough, because as he's saying, these chalk players that people want to play are trying to force in stacks. I feel like, you're looking at these rosters and you're looking at Herbert. Okay, I can play him with Allen. I know what I'm getting out of that. You're looking at Jameis. Okay, like I can play him with Kamara and Michael Thomas. Get that in. Joe Burrow. I know who his guys are. Let's get that in. And you're looking at these other positions, these other quarterbacks that stand out. And like with Devontae Adams, like that's really going to fall. Is it going to be Aaron Jones, catching the passes, or MVS, or Alan Lazard's back? And just going down the list of all these other guys, I feel like there's a lot more question marks of stacks than we're used to. So that's what's going to be really tough for people. And let's just get on the one main point here that's going to be the topic of conversation is Jameis Winston versus Taysom Hill in New Orleans. Like, what the hell are we to expect from that offense here? Because they brought in Jameis for a reason, but Sean Payton, whether Taysom's dating his daughter or, had an affair or there's some dirt on him, I don't know. But this kid will be out there playing. And like, this is going to be so infuriating, especially if Kamara is out for whatever reason. If we do get that news, this is just going to be an offense that we cannot look to trust. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that specifically, Kev, because I know you've been a Jameis truther as far as like getting him into DFS lineups. Even the turnovers don't matter with Jameis because this upside's so high. Can you trust them this week?
Before Kev jumps in, because I know Kev is gonna say how much he loves him. I just want to say that there is a red flag with Jameis for me. Obviously, the upside's there, and I'll let Kev talk about that. But the red flag for me is this is not the Bucs offense where we know he's just going to chuck it down the field to Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and average over 10 yards per target. I think you see a lot more game management in this Saints offense where he's hitting high trying to hit high percentage throws, which benefits Michael Thomas because he runs a lot of slants. But I don't know what to expect out of Winston. I know Kev loves him, and I'll let him touch on him. But I do think there are red flags that do merit a Winston fade in tournaments.
I mean, sure, it's not the same offense, but the weapons are still there with Michael Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders, Jared Cook, Alvin Kamara. Like, all the weapons are still there for him to cook. And he has smashed the Falcons in his career. 25% of his passing, or 21% of his passing touchdowns have come against the Bucs. I mean, he just killed, or coming against the Bucs, coming against the Falcons. The Falcons are 28th in pass DVOA, but 7th in run DVOA. It's hard not to have some interest in him.
Yes.
If he's going to be chalk, I'll probably find some other avenues,
right?
Because he's 5,900, so that makes some sense. But I will have some exposure to him, and maybe get a little bit different on how I build with him, or who I stack with him to try to get a little bit different, or who I run back on the other side. But this is, one of the best games on the weekend for a reason. And of course we get screwed because there are like 3 really good games this weekend, but none of them are on the main slate. One of them was this game. And then the Chiefs and Raiders game would have been fantastic. And that game is the Sunday night game. And then the Monday night game even would have been fun with the Rams and the Bucs. But of course we don't get that. So regardless, I definitely think you can go to Jameis. He's torched that team in his career. That pass defense is still terrible. I think it's actually I love Michael Thomas this week, and especially at his price. I think there's some people that are going to be shying away from playing him. But if you look at the last couple of games they played, they've really just manhandled the teams they played. They didn't have to really throw the ball. And so I think that this game is going to be a little bit different, and I think they're going to have to throw the ball a little bit here and actually air it out. And the one thing you definitely hope for is Atlanta getting some sort of a lead to actually push them to have to open up the offense and do a little bit more. Past that, I love Lamar Jackson this week. I know he's 7,300, but listen, I think the eruption is coming, and Tennessee has been terrible against the pass.
Sucks.
They're not getting any pressure on the quarterback. They're like 26th in pass DVOA, 19th in rushing DVOA. I think there's a lot to like here with Lamar Jackson at 7,300. I'm not shy with playing him with Mark Andrews or Marquise Brown. I just think an eruption spot is coming. His schedule the rest of the season is absolutely beautiful outside of Pittsburgh this Thursday. But past that game, I think that's about it. And I think we're going to start seeing more Lamar Jackson, what we saw last year. Past that, like other than the guys you guys talked about, I think Deshaun Watson is a great play at 6,500. That's entirely too cheap for him. And New England's pass defense has been atrocious this year. And this game is in a dome on the road. I know we saw the New England defense bounce back last week. My only concern would be is that New England probably try to do the same thing they did last week, where they play ground and pound and try to lean on the defense a little bit. But that defense is terrible, and I think you can, stack Deshaun Watson, whether it's with Will Fuller or Brandon Cooks. So I really like that situation there. And I'm going to play Andy Dalton this week at 5,300.
Me too. I'm right there with you.
He is incredibly too cheap. Minnesota's defense is not that good, and the pass catchers are incredibly cheap. It's a really cheap stack that has an immense ceiling. And I think if you're going to run it back, I think it's a way to get Dalvin Cook into your lineup and run it back with Dalvin Cook. Or you could also go Thielen or Justin Jefferson. I think if I look at this like a game that's going to shoot out, I want Justin Jefferson over Adam Thielen, just because in those games that they've had where it's been shootout, those are the games that Justin Jefferson has had his ceiling games when they come. So I do think Andy Dalton, I know it's a little bit gross, but at 5,300, it's not. I think there is definitely some upside there. And then, so it sounds like Teddy Bridgewater's out this week. It doesn't sound like he's going to play. At least that's the reports. Right. Are you guys going to run $4,800 PJ?
I've got no clue what I'm doing with PJ Walker.
Oh, man.
I probably won't go there just because an actual NFL quarterback, Andy Dalton, is only $500 more. And he has CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper, and Michael Gallup and Zeke Elliott to throw to. So that's probably where I would end up if I was playing that cheap. But I totally get it, man. He threw 15 touchdowns in 5 games in the XFL, and the Lions basically have an XFL-type defense.
I'm kind of interested in him. I saw that he has some type of relationship with Matt Rule from the time at Temple. So I find it kind of laughable that they're splitting reps at this point, him and Will Grier, because Will Grier just has no business being on the field. But if the guy can sling it, he's got explosive options there in DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson. So you're looking at a stack that could potentially pay off. That's not going to be owned at all. I really like that, especially, on the other side, if hopefully we can get some of the pass catchers in for Detroit, that would kind of make this even more explosive. If Jones and Galladay are both out, that kind of makes it tough there on the other side. Hawkinson's still dealing with that toe injury, it looks like, as well, too. So it could be a rough go for Stafford, but Stafford being out there definitely helps. I saw in the chat that Will was mentioning Joe Flacco as well, too. He comes in at 5K. The last time we saw him, he put up about 230. And it looks like, he's got concentration in the sense that Denzel Mims is going to be out there. He's been, solid as of late. Jamison Crowder, he kind of had a dull game against New England there, but he's been pretty consistent all year. And I think Brashad Perryman is on the injury report right now. He's dealing with some stuff. So you might only have to worry about those two guys. And then probably, whoever they put in, whether it's Jeff Smith or somebody else on the outside there. But he's 5K going against the Chargers team that's, giving up some big plays on defense, not the same. Any interest there in Joe Flacco for you guys?
I'd rather just play the pass catchers. Like, with how cheap they are, I think Mims is in the 3Ks and Crowder is – I don't remember what Crowder's price is, but he's around 6K, I think. I can't play Joe Flacco. Crowder 6,100. So, if those guys can get there off of just receptions and yards, and then you sneak in a touchdown for Crowder, he goes for let's say 8 for 100 and a touchdown. You're looking at 26 fantasy points there, 27 fantasy points. So all Joe Flacco has to do is throw one touchdown to Crowder, and he's all of a sudden one of the best plays on the slate. But yet Joe Flacco doesn't get there because he's only throwing for 200 yards and 1 touchdown. So I can't go there. I'd rather just pick one if that's what you're going to do. I prefer the Herbert side of that game. Though I don't know how I feel about Herbert after him getting his little boy haircut.
Man, that is awful. That is atrocious.
What is he doing? What is he doing? Those locks that he got.
I know.
He ain't getting no lay with that. I'm telling you, he ain't getting no lay whatsoever with that. So yeah, that has me off Herbert for sure this week. Kev, I like where you're going with Deshaun. I mean, Deshaun was a guy that we could pretty much trust, and I think people are going to look at the game logs and see that he struggled last week against Cleveland, and really, kind of forget about the win being a factor there. But I mean, the concentration in this offense is still huge. Like you're saying with Will Fuller or Brandon Cooks still being in the 5K range is absolutely just too cheap for him, as we'll talk about with wide receivers. And Will Fuller, he's low 6,000. So you can get a pretty cheap stack there. And Watson has had some success against the New England Patriots. I think in 2 of his 3 games that I saw, he put up 20 plus fantasy points against them. So you definitely like seeing that. And that was when these defenses were healthy. That's before this year when this Patriots defense didn't, have guys sitting out due to COVID and have injuries. So I definitely like that on the other side there. Who else did I want to touch on? Tua? You guys have any interest in Tua there at 5,800? I mean, another guy who's kind of, he offers a little bit rushing upside, nowhere near what Lamar and Kyler have been offering, but he is on the road against Denver. But this could be a Denver team that isn't playing with Locke on the other side. Does that give you any more interest, or is that just kind of a stay away?
No, I think that would even make it worse, because if you're going to want Miami to actually open it up, you're going to want, them to be able to push Miami. And I don't think that's
really good. Miami's.
Yeah, they've played really well. Besides, why would you play him whenever I would just play Carson Wentz, who's at 5,700 with better weapons and a better game script and a better environment.
Yeah, I agree on Wentz too. And like this just goes back to what I was saying. Like we've talked about close to 10 guys, and none of all of these guys are outside of Lamar are not really priced that high, but you're going to see a lot of ownership is going to concentrate on Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow, and Jameis Winston. And the pivots are so easy this week to just get off those guys. And you know what? If one of those 3 burns me, so be it. But we've just nailed through 8 to 10 guys that have higher ceilings than those guys do. And I just think it makes all the sense in the world, especially with how last week is a perfect example of how good players who are in good matchups that are going to be chalk can bust on any given week. I mean, look at Aaron Jones. We were like, he's the only running back on the slate who's in a good matchup that we can trust to smash. And he goes out and gets 14 or 15 fantasy points. And we're like, well, I guess we messed up because we didn't play Kamara. And then sure enough, Kamara goes for 3 touchdowns. So it's just pivots, man. You've got to somehow make yourself different from the field. And if I'm going to play a guy like Dalvin Cook, I don't want to load up a chalky Joe Burrow with him and just builds like that.
You think Big Ben's going to be chalky? Because he should be. I mean, he arguably has the best matchup of this entire slate. And we know that they're not a team that's going to be they're just going to show up and they're just going to run the rock, right? They did not do that last week against Cincinnati. They continued to throw the ball. They had a big lead against them, and they continued to throw the ball. Mm-hmm. And Jacksonville's just as bad against against the pass. They're 31st in pass DVOA. Actually, they're worse than Cincinnati is. The only thing that would be a little frustrating with him is, I guess, trying to knock down exactly who those targets are going to go to. But regardless of that, the last 2 weeks he's balled with 32 and 28. So, the ceiling is definitely there. He's still only 6,700. And if he's not going to be the favorite, I don't know what else to say on that.
Yeah, so ownership I've got right now at the top there's 6 guys. So you've got Burrow, Herbert, Winston, Matt Ryan, Lamar, and Watson are the top tier of ownership. Okay. Over 10%. Which I think is going to concentrate more towards Joe Burrow. I think him and Winston are going to end up the 2 highest owned because of their prices and their matchups. But those other guys are the obvious ones too. I mean, yeah, I think Big Ben's a great play. And even Carson Wentz, like you mentioned, Kev, Carson Wentz he's getting all his weapons back. I know he's looked awful this year, but I mean, the guy can still put up 30 points, 30 DraftKings points, and that's all I need from him. I don't need him to win games. I need him to just go out, give me a rushing touchdown here or there, throw for 302 scores. And
right. The other thing that's interesting about Ben too is in years past, we've seen significant home and away splits for him. And this year they're like eerily similar, which, is not something that we've been used to seeing. So especially in a matchup like this, where it's one of the softest that you can get for a passing offense, it does lend itself to be a nice play there where the passes are going. Let's talk about running backs as we move it along here. And you were talking about Dalvin Cook there in your spiel, Maddie, and I think it makes for an interesting spot because you look at the slate here and we got two running backs who are at 9K and above, but Alvin Kamara, if he plays at 92 against Atlanta, pass catching backs against Atlanta, Alvin Kamara is matchup proof regardless. So, makes for a good spot. Coming off of a big week though, I think a lot of people are interested in playing him. And then Dalvin Cook here going against a Dallas defense. And I mean, the last time we saw Dallas, they were getting carved up by Arizona, if I'm not mistaken. Or maybe it was the week before that, but they've given up some big plays to running backs. And this is a home matchup here for Minnesota that we know loves to get him established. So, he's going to be massively chalk. And then you have $1,000 drop off in Derrick Henry. Then you go down even further, 1,800 drop off to Aaron Jones, Nick Chubb against Philly, Miles Sanders. How tilting was that last week to have 2 touchdowns vultured with only one snap for Corey Clement, he gets a touchdown. And I think it was 4 snaps for Boston Scott, and he gets a touchdown. Just so infuriating. And like I said, Mike Davis, oh my goodness, look at that. Priced up $2,800 now, $6,800. Kareem Hunt behind him. So running back makes for an interesting play. I mean, it's so interesting to me to kind of see running back this week because guys like, okay, so if we have Kamara out, you're thinking Latavius Murray. I look for his price. He's $5,900. So he was already being priced up for the matchup or for whatever was going on there because he's actually seen, decent work, I guess, over the past weeks, but it really hasn't come to fruition in the box score. But he's $5,900. So he even, is priced up. You got couple of interesting plays there in the 6K range, but I'm just curious to see if you guys really want to try and make your builds to have one of these top 2 studs on them, because the moniker so far this year, and we're 11 weeks in on the season, was that running back points, just you can get them from wherever. You don't need to really pay up. The pay up guys haven't really worked out to the tune of what we've been seeing. And there's been a lot of guys in the mid range who just have been underpriced for the roles that they've been able to see where you can get points there. Do you guys share that kind of same sentiment going into this week? Because the high price guys just aren't in favorable enough spots to really pay off the price tag that they have. I mean, outside of Dalvin, I think he could pay that off, but still 9K for that guy running back that you're paying for. He really needs to get into that 35, 40 point range.
Yeah. I mean, I think you have to, each week it's different, right? So with McCaffrey is one thing because he was, he's going to come close to catching 10 passes and would almost double dip the 100-yard bonus on both the run and the catch. So he was a little bit different of a beast, but I mean, Dalvin himself, his targets this year, 4-2, 3-5, 2-5, 2-2, he at least has some sort of a pass game role. And I know in his 2 monster games that he had 63 and 46 receiving yards. So those definitely helped. I mean, all of his damage really came on the ground. I mean, you're looking at 206 rushing yards, 163 rushing yards. He's got other games where he ran for 130, 181. He has monster upside on the ground. It almost reminds me of Derrick Henry from last year where, yes, this guy can run for almost 200 yards anytime he steps on the field. And Dallas, yes, their defense has been playing better over the last couple of weeks, but they're still a defense you want to attack from the opposing side. So it's hard for me to get off Dalvin Cook this week, despite him being 9K. I don't know what I'm going to do with Kamara. I think that there's other guys down lower that you can end up pairing with Dalvin Cook to where you don't have to play both those guys. But I mean, a couple of years ago, we used to just jam in Le'Veon Bell and David Johnson, and those guys would get us 35 points every single week, no matter what. I don't think we have that with both Cook and Kamara. I think it's, they're more likely to score in the low 20s as opposed to the mid to upper 30s on a weekly basis. So there definitely is some downside to paying that much. But this week specifically, it's hard for me to get off Dalvin up there. And then you've got other guys who, should be priced up higher than they are, but they've got, different factors going on with their team. Like Zeke. Why is Zeke 6,500 against Minnesota? But then you look at, okay, no Dak, and he hasn't really done anything since Dak has gone down. But on the flip side, in the one lone game that Andy Dalton played a full game, Zeke had 10 targets. So it's like there are options. It's just going to end up being just like last week where we talked about it. Like there's options for guys to smash, and there's paths for those same guys to bust. So you're going to have to just take stands on some of these iffy plays, I think. Like last week, if you took a stand on Gibson, it worked out for you. And if you took a stand like I did on paying up and playing Aaron Jones, that did not work out for you. So, running back has been really tough to break down this year. It's almost been more unpredictable, I feel like, than the last couple seasons, for me at least.
Yeah. And Kev, I kind of, before, tossing it over to you, we see here this week, even more so than usual, I feel like 5K range is really interesting this week. You have both the Washington running backs in the 5K range with Gibson at 58, McKissick at 52, McKissick, is he Christian McCaffrey all of a sudden now? This dude is like putting up 17 points on DK without scoring touchdowns because of the pass catching work that he's seeing. And a guy who doesn't catch passes, I guess he's on the injury report now, but Damian Harris for New England, he's seen his kind of usage go up week in and week out, and 2 100-yard games in the past 4 there, which, doesn't really, the upside I don't know is there because he's not catching passes, but you at least know that he's going to be on the field, and this is a team that wants to run and establish the run. You got Rex Burkhead back there at 4,600. You got Kalen Ballage, who has seen volume increase like ridiculous, and he's 5,600. Gio Bernard at 5,600 in a tough matchup, but without Mixon, we know he's going to be on the field there. So I just want to bring those up because they're cheap options that do seem viable this week to kind of, if you are paying for a Dalvin Cook, can you play one of these guys with him, or are you trying to pay up at both spots at running back? I just wanted to see what your thoughts were on that, Kev. If you were paying up.
I'm going to pay up. It's obviously with Dalvin. I think Alvin Kamara makes some sense, obviously, as well. He's only $200 more, but Atlanta has been better against the run than they have against this past. Like I said, they're 7th in run DVOA, so they have been a little bit better against the run. But he's obviously somebody that you can almost count on to get 8 to 10 targets every single week. So that's raises his upside quite a bit as well. So I think they're both great plays. There's just no way I can ever see myself playing them both in the same lineup because unless you can find a really cheap stack, which I guess that's where like the Andy Dalton stack would come in, playing both of them with Dalvin, where you can maybe make that work a little bit. But past that, like it would be really tough to make it work to play 2 9K running backs. But I don't think you necessarily have to do that because there's some other running backs. Like I said, I think Zeke at 6,500, like I'm curious to see where his ownership comes in this week because that is just incredibly too cheap for the role that he has in that offense. He's going to catch passes out of the backfield, and I think this game can be closer than what people think that it can be coming off their bye with Andy Dalton back. So I do think Zeke is just entirely too cheap. Sorry. So was that Greg Olsen that just got hurt?
Yeah, he blew his knee out or something.
I hate to see it. Anyway, I really
anyway.
I really want to play Deandre Swift. like 6,400. But of
Yes.
course, he pop-ups today with a concussion out of nowhere because he wasn't on the injury report at all on Wednesday.
That's
so
concerning.
I don't know if he got it on Wednesday or if it's just really late symptoms is all of a sudden popping up. So he very well may not play, which is super frustrating because, he finally takes over this backfield, finally gets the role that we've been waiting for. He's kind of a lock to me like that. Like he's somebody that I probably would have had, I don't know, 40%, 50% of at 6,400 in this matchup against Carolina. It just made all the sense in the world. But now we're gonna have to wait and see where he comes in. And even if I can't play him, would you guys have any interest in Kerryon Johnson at 4K? If he's out, I know obviously Adrian Peterson's still got to get the early down work, but Kerryon Johnson would make a little bit of sense as the pass catching running back there because he's got to get all the targets out of the backfield.
What was that game they just played? Not this Minnesota. Yeah, Minnesota. He had those 3 targets at the end of the game. It was out of reach, but they utilized him for that handful of targets by the. I guess I would have to look closely into that if that's what it was telling us, and we knew. I would love for Swift to be questionable heading into Sunday, and then getting some pivot plays where we could get Kerryon where people aren't having the whole week to kind of think about that play. I think that kind of makes a ton of sense there and kind of could free up some of your builds. So that's interesting to me, but I wouldn't want Swift to be ruled out tomorrow and then have people be locking him in up his ownership going into Sunday.
I would almost play Adrian Peterson over Kerryon.
I just can't do it because he doesn't have any. He has 0 pass catching role.
He had 5 targets that Minnesota game 2 weeks ago.
Well, that's ridiculous because he should.
No, I agree. It's ridiculous, but it happened. It did happen. I mean, he's had a target, at least 1 target in every game this year except 1. So.
It's not a play that I'm smashing in and super excited about. It's just something if Swift were to miss a great matchup, I don't know. I think Kerryon could at least be somewhat interesting. I guess at least even just at 4K, but it's not. I don't think there's a high ceiling or anything there.
No, I probably would just stay away from that situation at that point.
Yeah,
well, we got a 4K cheap running back who has the backfield, Matty. How can you avoid that? He catches passes.
Ryan, don't do this. They're splitting work. It's different. And Adrian Peterson doesn't catch passes. Mike Davis catches passes. He was going to get 95% of the role.
And I was still right. You guys were wrong. I hit it. You guys were wrong, but whatever.
You tossed it up, Matty. You tossed it up. I had to do it. No, I mean, what about let's talk about the 6K range, because I do think, Zeke's in there and the Swift's playing. I agree with you, Kev. I mean, great spot, but the ownership definitely would have been there. So I was looking at other guys that I could, maybe talk myself into around them. And it's just so gross. Like the 6K range is so gross. But I do kind of have interest in Miles Sanders. I mean, when you're looking at last week and just kind of the weeks on what he's doing, with the role that he has, I mean, even without scoring touchdowns, he's getting into the 15-point range or higher. And I just feel like those plays last week are just so arbitrary, just so out of the blue that we're not going to be expecting those every time. And the plays before that, like the Corey Clement play where he scored, Sanders had the chance to score before that, and they just brought in Clement. It just, some of the things that they're doing there don't make sense. But this is just, I mean, it's so hard to trust Carson Wentz in this matchup, and Sanders gives them the best chance to win. And I'm looking at games, like in Pittsburgh when nobody wanted to play him, he had that big run, scored twice. Baltimore, not only 9 attempts, but still got 100. Like, if this Cleveland game is close and he's going to be on the field and nobody wants to play him, his ownership goes under the radar. Like, this guy still has a strong enough role for me to, think about playing him as a pivot to some of these other guys, and maybe even James Conner at 6,600. I talk about not wanting to play Conner because he doesn't really catch passes either, but Pittsburgh can control this game, and I can talk myself into scenarios where, Lutton on the other side is not going to be able to, keep up with this high-powered offense, and maybe they get in the red zone and let Conner, get some of his there with cheap ownership too. So that's kind of where I'm looking at, but I wanted to just touch on those guys as I think they'll go under the radar.
I also want to add, I think Gio Bernard makes a very interesting leverage pivot off of Joe Burrow. I mean, Cincinnati's going to score against Washington. Why can't they get down to the 3-yard line and Gio punches it in twice? And everybody who rostered Joe Burrow is pissed because Gio basically took 2 touchdowns away from him. And I mean, he's going to get 17 to 20 touches probably in that range.
Yeah.
And I mean Washington's defense isn't that good in all facets.
Right. And just Swift last week, I mean, showed you what, running backs can do against them. And you're looking at Gio Bernard and only 8 points last week against Pittsburgh, which you look at that and you're like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. But he saw 7 targets still. Mm-hmm. 7 targets and only putting up 8 DK points. Like something just doesn't compute there. 4 catches for 17 yards. That's crazy. So before that, I mean, he's seeing, 3 catches, 5 catches, 3 catches against Tennessee, Cleveland, Indy, and putting up 20 in 2 of those games, 20 plus, and then 11 in the other one. So definitely, has some upside here with the backfield to himself. I mean, Samaje Perine is not going to spell him enough to make that be warranted. So I do like that Matty a lot at 5,500.
Yeah, that Tennessee game, 15 carries, 4 targets. In the Cleveland game, 13 carries, 5 targets. So that's 19 and 18 opportunities in the non-Pittsburgh games. And he still had 15 opportunities last week. I mean, it's just Pittsburgh. You're not going to do much against them. So, yeah, I think Gio, it makes a great leverage play on Joe Burrow in tournaments.
I love it. Let's Kev, do you have anything else? I saw you kind of. I don't know.
I was just going to add, he does make a lot of sense since he's taken over. He's 8th in the league in targets. So, getting somebody that is going to be utilized in all facets of the offense at that price, I think does warrant some consideration. I mean, he's played at least 60% of the snaps. He's getting mostly all the touches. And, prior to that, I mean, he's dropped 20 and 22.8 the weeks prior to that. So, I don't see any reason why he can't. I was just going to ask you guys really quickly what your guys' thoughts are on a guy like J.D. McKissic, who, if we think that game is going to score, we know. I mean, J.D. McKissic is, since week 6, is number 1 in the league in targets, more than Alvin Kamara.
Yep.
The dude has 36 targets, 24 receptions, 167 yards. He's not utilized a ton, as a rusher, but 5 red zone targets. I mean, he's still only 5K. I don't know. Like it's really thin, but as a pass catcher and at his price, like I don't know. I think he makes a little bit of sense because Alex Smith is still the quarterback, and Alex Smith is just going to continue to drop it.
Yeah, I don't think it's thin at all, Kev. To be honest with you, I mean, he's
well. I think the question is like, what is his ceiling?
That's what I was going to say. Is have we seen his ceiling? Like, was his ceiling last week where he had 15 targets, caught 7 balls for 43 yards, and had a touchdown, and he scored 18 points,
and was also missed on a touchdown too. I mean, wide open. He had him in the flat. Alex Smith had him in the flat and just missed him completely. So, I mean, you're looking at that, and that's bananas at the price tag that he was. So I think it's safe enough to say that he has a role and you have a safe enough floor. I guess my point in saying all that was to say that, like, if you're making cash lineups this week, you're talking about with Joe Burrow, Matty, like, I think you play Dalvin Cook and you play McKissic and another running back there. Like, you can feel comfortable playing him in the flex because of the floor side that he offers you. And then in GPPs, I think you pair him with Cook. Well, you pair him with a guy who can offer you that 35, 40 range plus, right? To kind of say, okay, like I can get 60 points plus from these 2 running backs or 55 plus points from these 2 running backs and feel good about that. And if McKissic goes, for even higher, if you can get some of these wide receivers who are seeing a lot of targets, I like that play because he's just not, he's priced at a wide receiver basically, who would be seeing that fair share. I mean, look at Brandon Cooks. He's 5,200 as well. So I think he, with the rushing upside that he's offering, plus Alex Smith, dump off king, right? So I don't think those targets are going anywhere.
I think I would only play McKissic on Joe Burrow teams, like you're saying, because for Washington to be down enough like they were last week, I mean, they were down by a lot of points to Detroit early in the game, and they basically abandoned the run completely. For them to be down that much, Cincinnati has to put up points in a hurry. I think he makes sense, but I think in terms of correlation with your team, I think you got to play him on Joe Burrow teams. I don't know that I would play him as a one-off. I think I prefer Gio as a one-off from that game.
I like Gio. I like Gio too, and I think the ownership would be huge. But I do think if you're looking at it in Washington and you're like, I want to play a back, like you should be looking at McKissick way more than you should be looking at Gibson at this point, with them having a 600 range difference. I do think that we saw like Gibson's upside was last week, right? Like hitting that 2 touchdowns and whatever he got on the rushing yard, 100 or something. But he hadn't seen a third down touch in any game prior to last week or something like that. Crazy, like just not utilized really on third downs and not the pass catching roles. So I like McKissick a lot on DraftKings. Let's talk about wide receiver. Let's talk about some of these guys. Some of these wide receivers, they've just been mispriced week in and week out. And that's, led to us not having to, pay $7,100 for Keenan Allen, like people wanted to last week, and pay the guys like Tyler Lockett and Metcalf. And I mean, Hopkins paid off late, I guess, to a certain extent, but still, we're looking at it. I agree with Kev. I love Michael Thomas in this matchup. I mean, this secondary, we've targeted them all year. They're coming off of the bye, but the defense has been a little bit better with Raheem Morris being there. I mean, I think they do need some credit there as far as limiting goes, but the talent or lack thereof still shows up. I mean, Kendall Sheffield's terrible. Terrell hasn't been that much better. Isaiah Oliver hasn't been that much better. So this is a game that Thomas should eat if he's getting the work. And we kind of really only have a couple of guys at the top here, especially if Devontae Adams is out. He's 8,600. Julio, Keenan, Michael Thomas, AJ Brown, and Ridley, if he plays, are the only 7K guys that you got. And then you start getting in the 6K range. And then even then, you only have a couple guys. Then you're getting into the 5K range. So it's really going to be interesting to see how people build their teams, because usually we're talking about that 6K, 7K range of getting 1 or 2 of those guys in because they're target hogs. But I'm looking at this and, we got T. Higgins, like you were saying, Maddie, he's 5,900. Deontay Johnson is still in the 5K range at 5,900. Wow. Devontae Parker is 5,700. DJ Moore is 5,600. Travis Fulgham, 5,600. Tyler Boyd, 5,600. Marvin Jones, 55. I mean, Amari Cooper, 54. Gallup, 37. Lamb, 5K. I mean, it's just crazy, right? Like, you could just keep going. I mean, you could talk yourself. Brandon Cooks, 52. Mike Williams, 51. Emmanuel Sanders, 49. Like Corey Davis, 48. And now that's
Jacoby Myers, 49.
Jacoby Myers. There's so many guys in this range that you could talk yourself into. I mean, and it's not, I don't even want to say talk yourself into. That makes it seem bad. And by the way, Kenny Golladay, 5,800 if he somehow is playing, and he was limited. So that would be absolutely insane. To get him at that price.
It sounds like there's a really good chance that he plays.
That's crazy then, because I mean, at 5,800, my God, what the upside that he could offer, especially Marvin Jones is questionable and TJ Hawkinson not really looking like himself. It's going to be a fun week for wide receiver. I mean, in even the low 6K range, you're getting into guys that are just, really cheap for the upside that they could offer. So just as a broad general scheme of things, Maddie, just kind of talk to me. It is Thursday. We don't really have the slate finalized yet to really put firm, bang the gavel on any of these plays. But just hearing all that, like, where is your mindset going in attacking the slate from a wide receiver perspective?
I mean, honestly, I don't even know, because there's so many options. And like I mentioned, how good of a spot the Cincinnati wide receivers are in, and they're how cheap they are. And like, they're just the obvious plays, but they're going to be so high owned. And then you've got a team like Dallas. Like, you look at Dallas, they have very good wide receivers. Amari Cooper, you mentioned all 3 of their prices. Gallup is 3,700 and Cooper's 5,400 right. and Lamb is 5K. And look, I know it's Andy Dalton, but Andy Dalton is a serviceable NFL quarterback. Like, we saw him just last year, all throughout the entire year, was able to put up points with a bunch of crap at wide receiver in Cincinnati. And so I'm not necessarily sold that Andy Dalton is, just going to be this awful quarterback that's not going to, put up any points on the scoreboard. I think Dalton was thrown into a very, very tough situation. You're coming off your franchise quarterback just goes down. The locker room's deflated. The season goes basically out the window. You are now tasked with being the guy to save the team from a dumpster fire season, and you're getting thrown in against a good Arizona Cardinals team. And it's just it was set up for him to fail, right? And so, like, if it doesn't go good from the start, he's going to struggle, which is what happened. But he's had a couple of weeks to get things under his belt, get a mindset, get a mentality. I know he's missed the last 2 games, but he's going to come out. I think he's going to look good. It still remains to be seen which guys are going to end up being his favorite guys to target. But you look back at that one start, and you've got Cooper had a 19% target share, saw 27% of the air yards. Gallup had a 12% target share, but saw 27% of the air yards. Then you've got Lamb, who had a 19% target share, and he was in the 20% in air yards. And then Zeke also had a 20% target share. So it was like Dalton was kind of spreading the ball around to everybody except Gallup. But he was targeting Gallup deep. So it's a bit of an unknown, but these guys are so cheap that you can take shots on almost all of them across your different teams. And so, man, I don't know. You reeled off so many good spots, like for wide receiver this week. It's tough. And again, it just goes back to do not try as hard as you can to not play the chalk guys. Like, there's no excuse to be playing a 30% owned wide receiver this week with all the spots we have available. Play Dalvin Cook chalk before you play a mega chalk wide receiver. Like, even if Michael Thomas is going to be extremely popular, fine. If he beats me, he hasn't beat me all year. If he beats me, he beats me. So be it. I'll play Dalvin Cook, and I'm going to get different at wide receiver with all these high upside guys.
Yeah. And especially, Michael Thomas, I think it's a weird situation because I really feel like we don't know what Sean Payton's going to do at quarterback. Exactly. So that really scares me. So having one-offs, I think, of him makes sense. But if you're going to take a chalky wide receiver, like, at least try and, talk yourself into a scenario where the game stack makes sense, mm-hmm. or the actual full stack makes sense, right. To kind of play, get all the points there if you're going to just take the bait on the chalk at that position. Kev, where are you at as far as, like, what are some of your favorite spots to target this week as we talk about these wide receivers here? And there were guys in the 6K range that I didn't touch on. I know you talked about Big Ben and Claypool and Smith-Schuster are there, and Fuller's there at 62. So if you
I love the Steelers,
if you have any.
And Mike Williams. I didn't mention Mike Williams. I do love Mike Williams. The Jets are running out like 3 backup cornerbacks at all their positions.
I saw that.
They said they might shift the safety over to cornerback. And Mike Williams is 5,100 against the Jets.
There we go. And see, that's okay, so you're playing Mike Williams, and you talked about not playing Herbert, and so you're going to be getting leverage off of the field because Herbert teams are probably going to be stacked with Keenan Allen there.
Correct.
On the other side. And maybe some will have Mike Williams, but you won't have the other 2 if they don't hit. So and he's explosive enough to hit on his own. Kev, talk to me, wide receiver. What are you thinking about? I see the wheels turning.
Welcome to Jalen Reagor week. Is what it is. I love Jalen Reagor this week. 4,200. He's still incredibly too cheap to get the number 1 wide receiver at 4,200 is pretty incredible. Last week he had 7 targets. Like I said, I love Carson Wentz. I think it's a really cheap stack. Again, another opportunity to be able to pay up at the running back position, whether you want to do Wentz and Goddard and Jalen Reagor. But Jalen Reagor at 4,200 is just ridiculous to me. I don't know. They haven't moved him up yet. I know he hasn't had like an explosion game yet, but I do like him quite a bit. And then, if I'm paying up at wide receiver, obviously I already said Michael Thomas, love him. Keenan Allen, love him. But I also think Terry McLaurin at 6,900 against Cincinnati, if you're going to run that stack, or just getting, one-offs of Terry McLaurin. Like, McLaurin is matchup proof. Like, the dude just crushes every single week. I was interested to see how he would do with Alex Smith, but he continued to play well. So absolutely love him. At 6,900, if you're willing to pay down a little bit, you guys hit on a lot of these guys. Deontay, Juju, and Claypool all make sense. They all, have pretty massive upsides in them. Juju a little bit lower than the other two, but I really want to play T. Higgins at 5,900, but we'll have to wait and see. I know he has that illness. If he's able to play, because if he's not, AJ Green's only 3,600. So if T. Higgins were to miss this game, I mean, I think you have to have a little bit of interest in AJ Green, who's only 3,600. So that's just too cheap without T. Higgins on the field. Tyler Boyd, love him as well at 5,600. Again, that is incredibly too cheap for a player who can drop 30 points on your head. So I do like him. Jarvis Landry, I think, is ridiculously too low at 5,500. I think, he's somebody now with Odell. I think between him and Austin Hooper, I think every single week that you can target those guys. Landry doesn't have, a 35-point upside, but at 5,500, I think that you can feel pretty good on most weeks that he can get you in the, probably the 15 to 20 range. And at 5,500, that doesn't kill you. I think he does have a ceiling of somewhere in, the 25 range. Like you guys we already talked about, the Cowboys wide receivers are all fucking ridiculously too fucking cheap. 5,400, 5K, 3,700 is fucking stupid, and it's just fucking ridiculous that they're all that cheap. Like, not having, it feels like, just if you're looking for a cheap wide receiver, just go with one of the Dallas wide receivers, because they're all way too cheap. They all have, I think, a higher upside than where they're being priced, and I think it's a little bit ridiculous. And if they're going to carry no ownership, if they're going to carry low ownership, I'm about that life. Jacoby Myers, 4,900. I love Jacoby Myers. He is Cam Newton's target. Like, he is their number one target. And apparently now he's just going to come out here and throw dimes as well and throw touchdowns. So
that was wild.
I like Jacoby. Well, he's former quarterback. So
no, right.
But I love, this is a great matchup against Houston. It's inside a dome. We have no weather concerns here. I do think this game really has sneaky shootout potential, or it really has shootout potential in it. And so getting a number one wide receiver at 4,900 with the ceiling that he has. I mean, we've seen it now that this guy can go out and put up 150 yards, and he could definitely do it against Houston. So I do like Jacoby Myers at his price as well at 4,900. I think some other options, Michael Pittman, I think, is interesting at 4,500. Jalen Reagor, we already talked about. And then, like I said, if anything were to happen if Higgins were to miss, I do think that we should be taking a look at somebody like AJ Green at 3,600.
Yeah, the thing about AJ Green and Auden Tate actually saw his snaps drop, but going into the bye, it looked like he had kind of, gone back in favor, and he was a guy that complained and wasn't getting run, and then AJ Green was popping off, and then all of a sudden they started giving Auden Tate run again, and that's affected AJ Green. So that's been frustrating. So that's something to monitor, because the snaps did drop last week against Pittsburgh. So if AJ Green is going to see more, that would definitely help him, and especially pay off. And like you're saying, Kev, if there is T. Higgins missing, that totally changes it at all. But I do think there's even some merit if we can, avoid Auden Tate from seeing the field. That would be just wonderful in general. But yeah, Jacoby Myers' interest, I do like that game. It's just weird with the Patriots not really throwing touchdowns. I mean, I think they have like 6 passing touchdowns on the year. 3 of them, or I think it's 5, and 3 of them have gone to Rex Burkhead, which is just, infuriating. So Myers is eating, and it's all coming without scoring. So if he somehow, is able to find the end zone here, he could definitely be looking at having a bananas score off of that. Who else that I wanted to touch on here? I mean, yeah, the Philly pass catchers, Kevin, you do like, you were talking about Reagor here. With Jeffrey being back, and listen, I don't think this guy should be seeing snaps at all, but he was seeing snaps, and that made it infuriating to watch last week. Having Greg Ward out there, having Travis Fulgham, having Goddard, Zach Ertz could be back this week. So is there a stand that you would like to take there outside of Reagor, or are you just saying, I'd play Reagor and I feel most confident in him?
Well, I love Reagor, but Fulgham is definitely so in play. I think he's a much better wide receiver than we all thought that he was. And I'm not basing anything off of what happened last week for this week. So Alshon Jeffrey shouldn't even be on a football field. It's ridiculous that they pulled either Fulgham or Rager off the field. I think it was like for him, I think it was like 8 or 10 times, something like that. It's fucking ridiculous. Okay. The guy has no business playing football anymore. He's washed.
Right.
Like he's beyond washed. And so, no, he shouldn't be. So for me, like, yeah, if you want to go Travis Fulgham, I think you definitely can. I just prefer going the cheaper route at 4,200. And, you know, like I said, like if I was going to run a stack, I probably would hit with him and then Dallas Goedert. So, yeah. And then I did want to ask really quick too, really cheap guys. I know you guys already mentioned Denzel Mims, but I think Cam Sims also at 3,300 in this game against Cincinnati. If you look at his numbers the last couple of weeks, so the last 3 weeks against Dallas, he played 92% of the snaps. He didn't really see any targets in that game, but then against the Giants, he played 68% of the snaps. We saw 4 targets. And then last week, he played 97% of the snaps and ran 56 routes, 5 targets, 4 receptions for 54 yards. Like he looks like their number 2 wide receiver. I don't know, at 3,300, I don't think it's crazy. And I think that there is a path, you know, if he gets 4 for 40 and a touchdown, I think it's certainly there against Cincinnati.
Yeah, that's interesting, Kev. I mean, it's just I just don't know how many times we're going to see Alex Smith throw for 390. You know, that's what makes me just nervous about some of these guys. I mean, McLaurin, yes, even at 6,900. I mean,
of course.
The target share that he's seeing is ridiculous.
It really depends on obviously the game environment and how this game turns out. Because if it ends up turning into, you know, kind of a back and forth affair, then I think then that's when you'd want to target some of these guys. Yeah,
if Burrow's pushing it, then.
What about Jalen Guyton? If you're going down that low.
Yeah, as a deep threat. Yeah, I mean the dude has.
Talking about a guy that plays all the snaps. Guyton's been playing almost 90% of snaps at all the recent weeks. He doesn't get many targets, but his targets are deep. So if he connects on one,
I'd rather play Grant. I think
I'd rather play Gallup personally.
Well, yeah.
I mean, yeah.
But you're talking about other guys down there.
Yeah, I was just trying to look at some of these really, really cheap guys, especially for people that want to get wild and get Kamara and Cook in their lineup and not sacrifice at other positions. So I think looking at one of these guys, even Denzel Mims, the dude really, from what I've seen from him and the times that I've watched him, like he looks like he's going to be really good. Like, but he has fucking Joe Flacco and Sam Darnold at fucking quarterback. Like, if they can get a legitimate quarterback, I think Denzel Mims probably next year is going to be somebody that people are really excited about because he looks legit. Like, it's so infuriating because he'll make a great catch and then it's like they won't even look his way for another like half a quarter or 2 or 3 more drives down the road. I'm like, why are we not peppering this man with targets?
Yeah, makes no sense.
I agree.
Makes no sense. Real quick before we move on to tight ends, guys, if you're getting tight ends and defenses to wrap up the pod, how would you guys rank the Dallas pass catchers? Because I think for me it would be Lamb for sure at 5K one with the target share that he's seeing with Dalton, and then I'd probably go Gallup then Cooper. But I just wanted to get your guys' thoughts on that. Just because I think Lamb is going to be the target hog, and then Gallup is the interest for me at his price next, you know, being at 3,700. I think you could do a lot with that, but Cooper's still seeing a significant amount of target share, but I just feel like those are the 2 guys for me ahead of him.
I mean, I think I would definitely have Lamb 1 just because I think you can bank on a lot of those targets, but I would still probably have Cooper at 2, even because I mean, he's not 6,800 like we typically see him. He's what, 53? Which is just stupid.
Yeah, 54. 54.
Yeah, 54. And I get it. Gallup is 3,700, but I do think Gallup is a little bit more boom or bust, where you could probably easily. Cooper has a much higher floor than what Gallup does.
No, that's fair. Okay, let's talk about receiver before we get into defense and we wrap this up. And thanks everybody for rocking along. It's the Week 11 NFL DFF main slate here. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel. Shout out to everybody who's watching on Periscope and Twitch as well. And if you guys are listening to this the next day, we really appreciate that. Subscribe and rate and review on your podcast softwares. Guys, tight end, I mean, I'm through with the tight end position. Like I'm half ready to start the petitions to get this removed from slates and just start, putting Kelsey and Kittle at wide receiver, and let's just get rid of all the rest of these guys. But only 20 guys, I think I got this right, 20 guys here on DraftKings above the 3K threshold. So that really just shows me that there's just not a lot going on at the slate here. Or
not a single tight end above 5.
Not a single tight end above 5. You got Andrews at the top. Jonnu comes behind him, 49 and 4,700 respectively. Henry 46, Fan at 45, Hurst, Gesicki, Hawkinson, and Jared Cook and Ebron round out your 4K guys. I mean, just see what fits into lineups and go from there. I mean, there's really no have to have it tight end on this slate, and I don't really even know if there's guys that we can trust solo. I mean, Hunter Henry has been respectable, I feel like, with, at least 6 targets in the past of 3 out of 4 games. So he has a floor, but he's not really doing much with that. I really don't know what to do at the position this week, guys. I'll probably need your help. I guess for me, I'm looking at like Dallas Goedert. He's still 3,800, and I really don't like.
Still, they dropped his price. Like he was higher than that last week as well.
Oh 42? Yeah, 42. Yeah.
How do you drop him? Like how does he go down in price? I don't even get it.
Yeah, well, I guess, and so they still have Zach Ertz on IR, but he has a chance to come back. Is that right? Yeah, he's participating in practice.
I don't care if Zach Ertz can come back or not. Like $3,800 is ridiculous.
I just mean that could have factored into the price. I
get that. Yeah. Yeah,
but they're right by each other. So I mean, some of these other guys. I mean, Hawkinson, he's banged up. Cook without Breeze, I don't know if I could go there. Ebron's interesting, but there's 3 guys ahead of him. Hooper was a letdown last week, and granted that game was windy, but he really hasn't shown you much. Hayden Hurst, 4,400. He's seen targets, so maybe you can play him. Fant's banged up. I mean, Jonnu, it's not really a great matchup. Andrews is 4,900. I mean, you just go there because of the upside that he sees with his red zone role. I mean, that's kind of how I'm feeling is, I'll pay Andrews for the 4K guy because I know what his upside is. And then I'm looking at Goddard and below for a tight end because it's just ugly. I'd be looking at Logan Thomas at 3,300. It's ugly.
I like Hooper.
Yeah, I was going to say that's 3,900. Yeah,
because I'm throwing out that game last week. Really, the last 2 games for Cleveland because they've played in 40-mile-an-hour winds.
Right. And he didn't play in that Houston game.
And he didn't play in the 2 games ago against the Raiders.
I'm sorry, the Raiders. That's what I meant. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like last week with Chubb back, and you can run all over Houston, 40-mile-an-hour winds. Like Cleveland had no reason to throw the ball. I think they threw it like 40% of the time or something egregiously low. I think, playing against Philly, I think Philly can put up points against them. And we're going to see a higher scoring game than 10-7 and 10-6 the last 2 games that they've played in. So, I like Hooper. I mean, before he got hurt, 7, 10, and 6 targets, and now OBJ is out. And those were with OBJ. So, yeah. I think it's him and Mark Andrews are the 2 different pricing tier guys that I'm looking at. If I'm paying up, it's going to be Andrews, and then if I want to pay down a little bit, I think I'm going to play Hooper. I'm not sure. I haven't looked to see how chalky Goddard's going to be, but I would assume he is going to be very popular.
Even with the disappointing week last week, or disappointing first half, I should say.
Yeah, so it looks like Mark Andrews is the chalk, and then the next tier is 4 guys of Hayden Hurst, Hawkinson if he plays, Kyle Rudolph, and Dallas Goedert.
Wow, Rudolph! Oh my God,
Kyle Rudolph.
Yeah,
I mean, it sounds like he's going to be back.
I think he'll be back. Yeah,
he returned to practice.
Well, that would change obviously if Irv is back. Then Irv would probably become chalky.
And Austin Hooper's not in that tier.
No, he's in. Let's see what they have Hooper at. He's in the next. No, he's 2 more tiers down. He's in the 3% range.
Wow.
I will be playing Austin Hooper this week.
Oh, hell yeah!
If that's what his ownership's going to come in at.
Love it. Love it. Kev, talk to me. Hooper and log out for you? How you feeling?
It's pretty much going to be the same. It's going to be Andrews. It's going to be Hooper. And
got it.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Position's ugly. I can't stand it. It's frustrating week in and week out that we have to get there. Defense. Let's talk about it. We got Steelers at the top per usual, 4,600. Chargers at 4K, priced up because they're going against the Jets. But imagine paying 4K for the Chargers. I can't. 3,500 or Ravens, then Dolphins at 34, which will probably line up as a popular defense if Drew Lock's not ruled in. Vikings at 33, Saints 32, Colts 31, Browns at 3K, and Patriots at 3K for your 3K and above. Kev, you've been talking about Philly this week, but I really like the Browns defense here. Just with the way that the Philadelphia offensive line is playing, the way that Carson Wentz is playing. I think last week was his first week without a turnover or something like that. He's very turnover prone and they're getting pressure. So I like getting to the Browns at that price tag. I'll probably have some interest in Washington as well at 2,900 if Joe Burrow is popular, especially because with the passing volume, we know he could turn the ball over as well. And then Dolphins too. The Dolphins have worked out for me in some weeks, and 3,400. It's still, there's just a lot that you can do on the slate where, a 3,400 for a defense still feels good, even though they're the fourth highest priced defense this week, which seems crazy at that price because we've seen so many other defenses in priced up in good spots. So, Kev, what are you thinking about defense this week?
I'll probably go. I don't hate the Browns, obviously, with the fact that that Carson Wentz is so turnover prone. He's almost guaranteed to turn the ball over at least once. One of those turns into a touchdown. 3K isn't terrible. Past that, the Falcons isn't terrible either at 2,300 if you want to pay down with, Jameis sometimes making bad decisions. If he struggles a little bit in that department, $2,300 Falcons isn't, especially, if he really struggles, I think that can happen. But I think for me, it's pretty much the Falcons. I don't hate the Browns. I think Washington at 2,900. If they can get pressure on Joe Burrow, who can make some rookie mistakes, I think you could do that as well.
Maddie, you going to talk to us about 2K Jets or who you got this week?
No, I can't talk you into the Jets with safeties playing cornerback and all that fun stuff. I could make a case for Dallas, I guess, if you wanted to punt defense completely. Okay. They haven't been awful the last 3 games. Granted, the offenses they've played haven't been that good outside of Pittsburgh, but they did look good in the Pittsburgh game. They didn't really generate any sacks or interceptions or anything, but they held them down to, it was like single-digit points in the first half. And Pittsburgh really had to claw back, and that was a tight game the entire way. So, Dallas would be my absolute punt. I don't hate the Falcons either. I think they're very interesting against an unknown Saints offense. We don't know what we're going to get without Drew Brees. I think they're interesting too. Outside of that, man, if I was paying up, I would pay up for the Dolphins at 3,400.
Yeah, I was about to say that would make some sense too, especially if Drew Lock is out.
Yeah, they're one of the top defensive units in the league right now. They've got multiple double-digit fantasy point games. So I would. The Dolphins would be, if I was in a vacuum with no salary, the Dolphins would be my favorite defense this week.
Yeah, I like the Dolphins
outside of the Steelers, obviously, but
right.
That's a gimme.
Yeah, 4,600. 4,600.
Yeah, ain't nobody paying 4,600 for them.
Perfect trail off there, Maddie. Love the trail off. All right, yeah, that's the week 11 slate in a nutshell there, at least of what we know right now. And so that's even going to make the DFS main slate build even that much more fun this week as I load up here the $5 single entry huddle as we get into our DFS build this week. Pull this up there. 14,000 people that we are playing against, and we got a team to build, guys. So let's do it. Week 11 NFL DFS main slate build here with the DGen Nation pod. Maddie, go ahead. Tell us how we starting it.
Andy Dalton.
Let's go. Go ahead, Kev. You take it on.
CD.
I'm going to see what we can do with this. I'm going to put Jefferson in for that game.
Let's go with a full-blown game stack. Throw Dalvin Cook in.
I don't mind it. I don't mind it at all. We got Andy Dalton, Dalvin Cook, Justin Jefferson, CD Lamb. Even with Dalvin Cook being at 9K, we still have 49.40 per player left. That's running back, wide receiver, tight end, flex, and defense. So really about 5K plus when we're throwing in a 3K defense.
Mike Davis, no. That's not happening. Nick Chubb.
Chubb had a funny.
Or not Nick Chubb, Miles Sanders.
There
Okay.
we go.
Yeah.
There we go.
Let's see what we got here. Let's go Deontay Johnson, 5,900. One of those receivers is going to pop off.
Oh, man, this is going to be tight.
It's not tight. What you mean?
No, it's actually not tight. You're right.
You can make something happen, Maddie.
Let's go. Hang on. Stand by. Playing around with salary for a second. Amari Cooper in the flex, please.
All right. And he's in the late game too. So perfect for the flex. That leaves 32.50 per
You have
position.
2,600 left. I'm going Austin Hooper.
All right. Austin Hooper, 2,600.
I love this build. I absolutely love a full game stack of this.
Let's go Falcons, 2,300.
Let's do it.
Can't play Texans. Can't play Bengals. Can't play Broncos. Let's go Falcons. All right, Andy Dalton, Dalvin Cook, Miles Sanders, Justin Jefferson, Deontay Johnson, CD Lamb, Austin Hooper, Amari Cooper, Falcons D. That is the team. $300 left on the table, boys. We've been using most of the salary the past couple of weeks, so leave some salary there to even make it even more of a unique build as people will try and utilize all that salary, throw it into the huddle, and put a cap on the Week 11 NFL DFS main slate pod. Now, I didn't talk about this at the beginning of the show, guys, but for still rocking with us here as we're an hour and 18 in typical DGen Nation fashion, we're going to have 2 shows for you next week with the details coming out on our Twitter about that. But we will have some guests here early on in the week. We're going to be doing a show that is geared around the Thanksgiving pod. We will let you know when that's going to be happening. Thanksgiving Slate is one of our most traditional pods that we've done. I mean, we've had a ton of guests come on to break down the 3-game slate. I know you guys, even with the year going on, some people will be with family, some people won't, but we'll still have football to kind of talk about and love and watch, and that'll be great to kind of break down that slate. It's a weird one this year with some of the games not really working out, I think, the way that the NFL had planned on them, but we still got Ravens and Steelers divisional matchup there for the late night hammer on that slate. as well. So that's going to be a fun one. So that will definitely, get you guys the details on that, and appreciate you guys rocking out with us. And then we'll still do our usual main slate pod for week 12 as well. That will come out later in the week. Probably closer to the weekend, just how the slate is lined up, and Thursday being football, we probably won't be recording on Thanksgiving. So just know that that'll come later in the week. But we're excited about that. You guys got a 2-for-1 week here from the DJ Nation pod, which is going to be fun. We appreciate everybody who's been rocking out with us all year. And we're getting down to the home stretch, guys. So, fire up those DFS lineups here with confidence. You get pretty much three slates within 2 weeks to play on. So that's even more exciting. They're 3 full slates. If you guys, fantasy championships, as teams are coming down to the wire, you guys make sure you guys are tuning into the Wednesday show. Make sure you guys are tuning into the Sunday game day shows that come out starting at 10 a.m. Central Time there with Kevin, Cody, and Robbie. Lot of fun that we're having here at the Fantasy Authority, helping you guys with the lineups, helping us get winning this money. We appreciate it all. So we appreciate you guys rocking with us. DJ Nation Pod is where you can find us on Twitter. Fantasy Authority, FF_authority on Twitter is where you can find all the content there, all the goodness there. And, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit us up on the mentions. Hit us up in the comments. Hit us up on the rate and reviewing the show. Give us those 5-star ratings. We appreciate it. It's the Week 11 NFL DFS main slate for episode 89. Signing off for the Godfather himself, Mr. Kevin Steele at Fantasy Route 13. Matty Buckets, Matty DFS is where you can find him on Twitter. And me, Ryan Williams, Ryan Alexander _W. We will catch you guys next week for all of the fantasy goodness. And until then, get that money. Peace.